everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad you're here with us. I'm Brooke Cunningham. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at LogicMonitor, and I'm joined by my colleague Garth Fort, our Chief Product Officer. And Garth, you and I, we've been in this space for a long time, and observability. Now we're moving towards autonomous IT. So it's pretty fun that we get to have this conversation today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, happy to be here. Like this has been a really fun kind of honeymoon introduction for the last year here at LogicMonitor. I've had an opportunity to meet with hundreds of customers, all of our engineers, our product managers, and start to really think about how we can solve like really core problems that are going to help customers on this journey towards autonomous IT.
Great. Well, let's dig into it. Before we get started, I do have to do the requisite brief safe harbor note. So today's conversation reflects forward-looking views. They are informed by our research and, of course, what we're seeing across the industry, but they aren't guarantees or product commitments. With that out of the way, let's get started, and I'll share a little bit of context. So today's conversation is based on a recent research study that LogicMonitor just published a few weeks back in January, the 2026 Observability and AI Outlook for IT Leaders report. And I'd love to tell you a little bit more about the study because it's the foundation of the data that we're going to be discussing in the fireside chat here today. So the report was built on survey data. We went out and had respondents over 100 VP level IT leaders who directly own observability budgets. And just to frame that breadth, it wasn't just a LogicMonitor view of the world. We did intentionally survey a mix of respondents. So some of the respondents are LogicMonitor customers, and some of the respondents were not existing LogicMonitor customers. And that was across North America, across EMEA and Asia Pacific. And it also spanned different industries, different environments, all of the respondents facing similar pressures. And these were senior leaders, as I mentioned, that responded, most of whom are the final decision makers when it comes to observability spend. And in other words, this data does reflect the people signing off on the investments. And given today's audience, it's very possible that some of you on the line with us here today were amongst the respondents. So if you did take the time to participate, thank you so much. We're super appreciative. Your perspectives are directly shaping the research and help surface what's actually happening inside IT organizations right now. So again, a big thank you if you did participate. And the data shows that all of you as leaders and your teams, you're changing how you're thinking about observability, as well as about how you're thinking about AI and operational risk here in 2026. And they reflect the decisions that you and your teams are making right now. And these decisions, they're being made against a backdrop that's just so fundamentally different, even from a few years ago. So let's talk about what's changed and why it matters. So first, maybe to set a little bit more context, and I know many of you are living this every single day, so I'm not sharing anything that's maybe foreign to this audience, but our IT environments have just become so much more dramatically complex. You know, all of you, most of your organizations, you now rely on dozens, sometimes hundreds of interconnected services just to operate. Your cloud platforms, you've got your SaaS tools, third-party tools, APIs, payment systems, everything is connected. And so outages don't stay contained anymore. So when a major provider like our cloud services with AWS or Azure or Cloudflare has an impact, it's just a cascading problem. And as consumers who are potentially affected, I've been thinking about some of the recent outages like Cloudflare. We all feel it immediately when we're going about our day-to-day interactions with, different companies that we interact with on a daily basis. I think thinking about payments failing on our banking app, or not being able to book a flight or check in for a flight because the system's down, or that sort of example. When we depend on all of the systems for businesses to effectively deliver on their customer experiences, they're not just technical problems anymore, they're business critical moments. And if this is your environment and your customers are noticing an outage like that instantly, that downtime is just not acceptable anymore. So this has just become even more mission critical to companies. And, I personally, been in the space a long time. It's evolved a lot, and it used to be monitoring, up down monitoring, and traditional monitoring worked. It worked when systems were simpler and when dependencies were known, and those failures happen inside your own environment, inside your own data center. But that's just not the world that we're operating in anymore. Your team, you and your teams, you're managing on-prem systems, multiple clouds, all those SaaS platforms, and internet dependent systems. They all sit outside, some of which sit outside your direct control. So monitoring can tell you that something changed, but it can't really tell you where the issue started or how it's going to spread or even give you the smoke signals to help you prevent it in the first place. So that's where observability is really here to close the gap and showing how systems actually behave across all of this complexity before the small issues become major incidents or outages. So, when we were analyzing the data in this survey, this exact gap showed up so clearly. And we really took the data that we got back in the survey and we categorized it into, some major themes that we were seeing. And so we see there's 5 forces that are actually converging right now to accelerate the shift to autonomous IT. So let's get into a little bit more about what we heard in the survey to help tee up our conversation. So let's dig in here on the 5 forces converging towards autonomous IT. So the first one was around observability budgets. And one of the major takeaways that we saw here was that observability budgets are becoming protected infrastructure. This was a new insight. That these budgets are now consistently being seen as mission critical and less prone to cuts than they were in times before. The second force is around consolidation. And this really was validating for things that we're hearing when we're talking directly with our customers and customers that are evaluating LogicMonitor. Those legacy monitoring tools that I just mentioned, the growth in observability solutions has led to this proliferation of tools. We're going to talk more about why consolidation matters more now than ever, with the need for consistent data sets in the AI world to better leverage AI. And then related, platform loyalty is sort of disappearing. It's giving way to agility. It was really interesting to see in the data that there's less vendor lock-in than previously, and that platform loyalty is really moving towards a preference for innovation, AI capability, and the ability to really have the best, latest, and greatest in terms of AI capability. And then the fourth is around how current tools are not delivering actionable insights. There's a kind of a reckoning over the overpromise that a lot of solutions and tools have made, and they're just not delivering. And as we move towards autonomous IT, these actionable insights are a critical dependency. So that was a really interesting insight. And then the fifth here is around AI adoption maturing. It certainly is, but one of the key takeaways was that most organizations still have significant runway to move out of pilot mode and into a more full production model. So I'm going to dig in a little further on each of these 5 just to give you a flavor for the data that we saw in the responses. So framing up the first force, that observability budgets are protected infrastructure. They're staying resilient. Even with budget pressure, we all know, there's consistent budget pressure in our environments. CIOs are facing a lot of budget pressure. Interestingly, observability spending isn't getting cut. In fact, 96% of respondents, the leaders responding to the survey, expect their observability budgets to hold or grow. Within that, 62% expected increases. So this was really interesting to see that observability budgets are resilient. And it really ties back to those outages that I was talking about and how they're so tied to customer outcomes and experiences, business outcomes. Observability is no longer a nice to have, is what we're hearing here. Observability is a business imperative. So when performance issues are directly impacting revenue, Uptime is non-negotiable. You can't cut your observability budget. So, for those of you in the audience that are advocating for your budgets in observability spend specifically, this data really backs you up. Observability is being protected across the industry because it's foundational to operations. So, let's go to the second force here. So, those protected budgets don't mean that teams like yours, that leaders like yourselves aren't just spending in the same way. 84% are consolidating tools or looking at consolidation. So, consolidation really is the optimization strategy, is what we're hearing here. And it is partly due to cost, but mostly it's around cutting that operational overhead. When telemetry is just spread across the tools, that correlation becomes really impossible. So teams are spending too much time context switching, and instead of being able to focus on finding the root cause, solving the problem, mean time to resolution coming down, consolidation is helping resolve that or minimally at least reduce it. And this is again, we see it in the data, and also it's very consistent with what we hear when we're having individual conversations with our customers, as well as organizations that are evaluating LogicMonitor. So that takes us to the third force that we heard. And this one was really around, the openness to switching. And we see here that platform loyalty is fading. 67% of respondents are switching platform or open to switching platforms in the next 2 years. Uh, the current cost efficiency of many solutions is not adequate. Integration is painful. And a lot of it was also around the innovation and AI features. There's many tools and vendors in the space that are more in a legacy category. That's driving a lot of this interest in consolidating or switching. And so it was really interesting to see that the window is now to help organizations evaluate the platform for the future. And that takes us to the fourth force, and the data backing up the frustration that organizations are not getting the cost efficiency or having trouble with integration. That it ties to 41% are satisfied with the insights generated from their current platform. So leaders cited common challenges that their teams face every day, like alert volume, lack of context, manual correlation during incidents, just to name a few. And so that tells us collectively data isn't the issue per se. The issue is really making sense of all that data that's collected and being able to deliver actionable insights quickly. So this really was interesting to see, and it really ties back to the last force around platform loyalty. If your current solution is not delivering the outcomes, you're certainly going to be open to switching. And that takes us to the fifth and final force, which is that AI adoption is maturing, but most of the organizations, the respondents here, still have significant runway. Only a small percentage of the organizations in the responses have actually operationalized AI across IT ops, and most teams are still piloting or experimenting. So some of the reasons behind that that we heard and saw in the respondents is that the gap comes down to fragmented data. There's also a bit of a trust factor with the new solutions coming to market in AI, and really just getting over that pilot stage of the difficulty of turning AI output into action. So there's a lot of opportunity here, which will be a great thing for us to dig in to in the conversation with Garth. Now, these five forces certainly don't exist in isolation. I see them so intrinsically looped. Cost pressure is driving consolidation. That consolidation helps to unify the data. And then unified data actually helps AI work effectively. And then when the AI is working, it can help justify the continued investment. And then that investment becomes protected budget and the cycle sort of continues. So as this loop takes hold, teams can move from reactive to predictive, which ultimately brings us to autonomous IT and the Q&A part of our fireside chat. So I'm really excited. So that gives us the foundation for our conversation. And we had quite a number of you in the audience today submitted questions. And thank you so much for those of you that took the time to submit those. It was great to see the enthusiasm. And those questions are going to help form the basis for this great conversation. Okay, Garth. So we walked through the forces, we've set the stage for autonomous IT. When people hear that term, what does autonomous IT actually mean in practice? This is something I've heard a lot in the questions.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not a new term in the industry. I think we started talking about this right around 2001, if I'm not mistaken. There were a couple of vendors that put out manifestos, if you will, that talked about autonomous IT being self-healing, self-securing, self-configuring, all of these sort of systems that would basically be able to operate without human interaction. Like, I think the idea is that we want to have systems that can sort of identify when they're unhealthy and take themselves to the doctor, if you will, and get a checkup. But like what we're seeing now is like in the last couple of years, really the dawn of AI has brought to bear like this massive amount of computational power to do model training against like really complex sets of telemetry data, and then figure out how to actually have agents that can actually start to operate like semi-autonomously. Like right now, we've got humans that can observe kind of those agents, but the agents can actually take a lot of agency, if you will, on sort of figuring out how to diagnose and then figure out how to remediate issues over time. And I think the humans need to like build trust in the agents, and the agents are going to have to sort of figure out how to work with the humans. But those recommendations are going to start to become much more automated over time. And we heard from some great customers this week. Like it's going to free up a lot of the like I would call it the routine toil of like maintenance and dealing with like normal performance degradation and stuff like that. The agents are going to be able to take care of a lot of that. And what like autonomous IT really is going to mean is that these systems can detect and they can decide, they can act in their own environments, and they can start to like deal with issues that might just be fundamentally too complex for a single human to solve in real time.
Yeah, that's such a key point. The complexity of the systems, and we heard that in some of the research as I was just covering, that the complexity of the systems has just far exceeded human capacity. And so that's where observability and AI first observability has become so critical, and now really on the path to autonomous IT. Which actually leads really nicely into our next question. And this was a question that was submitted on behalf of one of our attendees. Thank you for those of you that submitted questions. That's really helped us form the basis for this conversation. So, is AI automation really human in the loop or human out of the loop? How are teams striking that balance today? What are you seeing and hearing from customers you're talking to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd point to our own internal tech ops team as an interesting kind of case study. We're ingesting over 2 trillion metrics per day. To put that in context, the world does about 2.17 billion credit card transactions a day. So multiply that by 1,000. That's how much data is actually flowing into our systems. And when I talk to, our own teams that sort of like manage systems at that level of scale, there's obviously no way that we can process all that data. So our own operations team are kind of very human in the loop right now. Like we're deploying AI everywhere we can to help with deployment across, CI/CD, across quality assurance and testing, across even code generation, et cetera. But we always have right now like a human that's there supervising the agent. And so that's kind of where we are right now. I think over time, if I just use ourselves as an example, like we're getting more and more comfortable in trusting the agents and the code that they create in the unit tests that they're coming up with to help us test that code. In the operational diagnosis and the root cause analysis, we're using Edwin to manage our own environment, for example. And we're becoming over time much more confident. And I think that the dance is going to be figuring out um, like where you need to have the human in the loop. I think the human becomes over time a supervisor. They can kind of like ask the agents like, what do you think? What's your plan? And then make sure that those agents are actually executing in a way that's actually fixing the core problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really reflected in the survey results that we saw in the fifth force, which was around, a lot of the respondents being stuck in this piloting and experimenting. I think a lot of that is the trust factor and being able to have the pattern recognition that the right actions are being taken, then it becomes the supervisor element. And we're seeing that also with a lot of our customers as they're adopting our Edwin AI product. So maybe to kind of pivot to another practical question that we hear a lot and we received in advance. The question was around, you know, res- response of being interested in automating alert escalation out of hours to avoid the need for 24/7 presence. Specifically, this was someone that's, in the NOC, network operations leader. So, what's the best way to do this automation?
It's a good question. I don't know that we're ever going to get rid of paging. Like stuff goes bump in the night, people are going to get paged. But like one of the things that we're seeing with our Edwin customers is they really kind of start by using AI to automatically correlate these alerts, like figure out where you can kind of assess severity and understand the impact outside of those business hours, and like do that initial implementation. Like in a way, they're using Edwin. Like you page Edwin, I don't page Brooke at 4 o'clock in the morning when stuff goes wrong, but like Edwin wakes up. Edwin never sleeps, by the way. Edwin's always awake. They're always alert and always awake and kind of watching your systems on your behalf. And then we can automate the triage and the root cause analysis. And so, like in a good situation, you're still going to wake up a human. Like when stuff goes down in the night, Brooke, you're still going to get a call. But like when you get online, you can actually see that the agent has actually done all of the initial triage on your behalf. They've looked at all of the different things that have happened across the system. What went bump in the night? Why did it go bump in the night? And I'm going to give you a likely root cause analysis so that you might be able to just push a button and execute a runbook to fix that, and then you can be back in bed within 15 minutes. And so that's kind of where I think people are starting, is how do we like employ agentic AI to do a lot of that early diagnostics. We see the alert, we fix the alert, we correlate the alert, we give you a recommendation on how to fix it, and then the human just has to click a button and you're off to the races.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then, the that prioritization. So if it's low risk, known issue, known run book, as you're saying, then Edwin AI, he's on call all the time. And then you're only bringing in the human when it's a super critical alert. So that's really, really key. Another question that we got, Garth, we see a lot of consolidation happening in the observability space, and it was one of the key factors, that a lot of the respondents are looking at consolidation. And so one of this particular question was really referencing that we've seen continued consolidation of the vendors themselves, and sometimes not with the greatest of outcomes, as some of the acquisitions and certain vendors being acquired by larger vendors. So the question is around whether the IT sector has learned anything from large platform acquisitions that reduce flexibility for the customers. So how do you see that concern coming up with customers that you're talking to?
I think that it's fair to say IT teams, security teams, DevOps teams, SRE teams, they all love their tools. But the tools are kind of like this interesting thing. They should help in the diagnostic moment, but because all of these different teams are using different tools, it actually like confuses the diagnostic. Like at a moment of crisis, it's actually really hard to get all these teams kind of like, honing in on the same data. So we do see this, like I'll take an example from like Chemist Warehouse. They operate 500 different, pharmacy stores across Australia, and they've got a very lean IT team. But they're kind of like completely overwhelmed by alert noise. And so they had all of these tools and all these different teams that were actually like in a moment of crisis were creating all this sort of confusion. It could be store going down, refrigeration issues with drugs that need to be kept at a certain temperature. And there was like this crazy chaos around that. Um, when we partnered with them to get Edwin in place, it actually like helped them to do that essential triage, like separate, increase the signal and reduce the noise. And they were able to kind of figure out how to take all of these different telemetry signals from multiple different tools, and sort of consolidate that all within Edwin. And so, they reduced alert noise by over 88%. They cut incidents by 22% in the first 30 days of deploying Edwin.
Oh,
And so they were pulling all this data in from all these different sources, but by getting into a single place where you had like a system of intelligence like Edwin that's able to kind of make sense of all of that noise, it actually just really helped them kind of become much more responsive to the transient performance issues that are just part of running IT.
yeah, that's great. And it also really goes to what we heard in the fifth force from the survey about moving from pilot to production. And they were able to do that so quickly. And then that was, and also prove it out like that, reduction in alert noise and the cut incidents that you mentioned. Those are phenomenal results to have in such a short period of time. And those are the types of results that you can really take to the leadership, up to the CIO and even the CEO. So to switch gears just a little bit, talking since we've been very focused on the infrastructure, the report also talks about internet performance, and user experience monitoring. And for those with us here today that are not aware, LogicMonitor recently acquired Catchpoint, the leader in internet performance monitoring. And we're so excited to have that now as a part of the LogicMonitor offer. And so, what's the blind spot when you're only monitoring infrastructure and not also the internet performance, Garth?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're very excited to welcome Catchpoint into the family. Um, there's this great story. Mehdi, who was the founder of Catchpoint, he's been building that company for 17 years. He tells this story about how they were able to, with a very large retail customer, like a large e-commerce customer we've all heard about, they were able to detect performance issues with specific browsers, like in China, on the opposite side of the world. The the IT team that was responsible for looking at these systems, sitting in California in a very comfortable spot, kind of was looking at all these green lights across their dashboards and saying, like, I don't think we really have a problem. And so they put an engineer on a plane. They flew him over to Beijing, and that engineer with a stopwatch was able to confirm, in fact, that Catchpoint was right. Like the synthetic testing that Catchpoint was running on the other side of the planet was catching performance issues long before the IT teams were kind of sensing it. And there's this like fascinating thing. Like the internet is not one network. Like the internet crashed for the first time in October in 1980. Like I was probably out at recess playing dodgeball somewhere, but the internet went down completely for 4 hours in 1980. And we've never had a crash of that magnitude. But even today, February of 2026, there will be transient performance issues that happen across this giant weather pattern of the internet, which is really kind of like this loose accumulate, like aggregation of thousands of independent networks that all kind of work together as one. But that means that there's these internet patterns. So LinkedIn's a great example. LinkedIn is you can get it to your phone, you can get it on your web browser, on your PC, etc. LinkedIn's available all the time. And they've been a Catchpoint customer for a lot of years. They serve 500 million users, 200 plus countries, and they have all of these different DNS providers. They have different CDN providers that sort of help them serve, scripts and HTML and bitmaps into kind of the web pages. And they have issues that pop up from China to India to parts of India and South America where the local infrastructure is just inconsistent and subject to these kind of like transient performance issues. But Catchpoint has this network, 3,000 global points of presence around the world. They can actually understand weather patterns on the internet. They have this feature they call Internet Sonar, which actually shows you like around the world, like what are all the different things that are happening in the network around the world in real time and give you an advance alert. Like it's almost like an early warning system. Like you can imagine if you have a hurricane that's bearing down on the East Coast or the West Coast or wherever hurricanes are bearing down, like you want to be able to know ahead of time that that hurricane's coming, so you can batten the hatches and get ready and everything else. And so, that's actually one of the most exciting things is like Catchpoint, because it's got this globally deployed. It's the largest available observability network on the planet. And they actually give us a lot of data that actually helps customers just really like understand like these issues before, like these transient performance issues. They're just transient performance issues, and they're generally ephemeral, and they'll disappear and they'll solve themselves over time. But if you can detect them before they hit your infrastructure, you can actually like prevent them from becoming incidents that end up, on the news wire or in the boardroom. Like, so
Yeah.
anyway, that's Catchpoint. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that becomes so critical. I just think about, I love that LinkedIn example. So many of our customers need to have visibility inside the firewall as well as outside the firewall because it's so critical to what they're delivering from their user experience perspective. And, gosh, LinkedIn, that's so impressive with that just scale that they have and how critical it is for all of us that are accessing LinkedIn all the time. Gosh, I don't even remember life without LinkedIn these days. That's just so critical for them to deliver the service to all of us that are their customers. So great. Well, that takes us to our last question. So, mid-sized teams, balancing legacy systems, now cloud platforms. You mentioned security earlier too, compliance, and of course, all of our IT leaders and their teams are getting held accountable for ROI. So, if we're thinking about autonomous IT and some of the things that we heard in this survey, where should teams start?
It's a great question. I actually think like I would start by unifying your visibility into like the rich set of telemetry that's available to you. Like if you've got the visibility, like that's kind of a starting point. And then I think the next step becomes how do you think about taking all of that visibility into this telemetry and you want to apply automation to it. And automation can be simple rules-based automation, like when a server gets unhealthy, let's run some diagnostics at real time when the alert fires. And then if it's a known problem, let's fix it like in real time. So humans never need to kind of be in the loop there. Real world systems are more complex and, automation requires perhaps that's where AI comes into it and Edwin can help. If it's just an unresponsive web server, that's a really simple fix. If it's like a more complex issue that might involve transient performance on the internet, you actually need all of this like data coming in, and you actually will be quite I think pleased by how AI can help you make sense of very complex issues quickly and get to that root cause through things like Edwin. But the other thing to think about is like you really have to define governance early on in the process. AI is going to be a great enabler for the next decade of IT. But I think people want to start thinking carefully about like how they think about governing agents. Like Brooke, you and I can't interact with different systems within LogicMonitor without logging in. We've
Right.
got roles-based access control, like what we can see, what we can do, what systems can we take action on, and everything that we do in our systems is logged and monitored. That's normal. That's the way that humans interact with IT, and it's been that way forever. But we need to start thinking about how that can apply to these agents as well. You don't want agents kind of like running amok and doing stuff that's not written down to a log somewhere. It's not auditable in a way that you could, take to whatever regulatory, governance committee that you've got to deal with. And so I think people to start thinking about how you take advantage of like how agentic AI is going to help you in your ongoing operations. You got to start thinking early about the sort of the governance framework around how those agents are going to be allowed to operate within your systems. I don't think it's going to be rocket science. I think you're going to apply the same safeguards and guardrails to agents that you would apply to any human that would interact with your system. But just like you wouldn't want a bad actor within your IT environment, like causing all sorts of havoc and exfiltrating data that you don't want them to get, you kind of want the same safeguards around agents. Even if they're powered by AI, you still want the same safeguards around agents that you have around your humans. So, anyway, that's kind of like visibility. Then you get to thinking about automation, and ultimately, the governance is going to enable the automation to give you the kind of returns that you really want to see.
Yeah, I love that. Really, really great roadmap. And then, being able to operationalize AI, that just allows it to then be, as we talked about earlier in the results, that it comes this virtuous cycle. So that's great. Well, thank you, Garth. As we wrap up, what would be one key takeaway that you would have?
Autonomous IT is here. Like it's not hypothetical. I've been talking about AI for a long time in my career, but like we're at a point where it's real, and I think people need to really lean in. The technical foundations are in place. The operational pressure is very real that all of our customers face every day, and we see that customers are already moving in that direction. And so it's not if the shift is going to happen, it's when. And I want our customers to lean in with us and help us kind of enable them to really kind of lean into this next wave.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And speaking of our customers and our community, that's where we also see so much really a great sharing. We share all sorts of great examples with our customers, and they also share with each other. So that community element of learning from each other is so critical during this time. So thank you, Garth, for joining us today. And just to wrap up for our audience today, again, what we covered here today reflects what we're seeing across the industry. Observability has become foundational infrastructure. Teams are consolidating. Operationalizing AI is really the critical linchpin to delivering those real outcomes, and extending visibility beyond your own infrastructure, beyond to the internet. That's where a lot of the business impact is happening. So the shift to autonomous IT is already happening. And if you want to learn more beyond what we shared today, read the full report, we've got the QR code here up on the screen. And we're here to help. As I shared, our community is really engaged. Our team here at LogicMonitor, our partners, as well as our community members. So if you want further support, we look forward to engaging with you directly. And thanks again for joining us and helping shape today's conversation.